Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello and welcome back to Wallula's weekly podcast. My name is Zach Bolin, I'm student pastor at Wallula Christian Church. I'm joined by Craig Archer, our worship pastor, and Lance Kaufman, our lead pastor. We are glad that you're with us today, and we are continuing on with our series in the book of Acts. I feel like I've been saying that for a long time. We're continuing on in our series in the book of Acts. It's a long one, yeah. I feel like it's been over a year, but we're in Acts 21. Has it not been over a year?
No.
Because we've taken breaks. Like we had, Christmas was a break, and then Easter.
Yeah. All in 2024.
Is this all? We started in 2024?
Yes, sir.
We're getting close, though.
Yep.
It's close to a year.
The stretch run, even.
The stretch run, yes. Well, it's been pretty close to a year. And but yeah, we're looking at Acts 21. And if you haven't heard it, I would encourage you to go listen to it because you could stay up on everything. And also because Craig Archer was the one who preached this past Sunday. I did not get to see it. I was helping out with the Sunday school upstairs, but I did watch it. So we are looking at specifically giving your testimony and what that looks like. And so we'll talk more about that later. But before we do, we're going to come up and answer a fun question. Craig, did you come up with this one, or did you?
I did.
Did you just find it, or were you thinking? I don't know.
I came
Was there
up
a
with
reason
it.
you came up with this?
I came up with it, and then I instantly knew my answer.
Okay.
And so I just thought,
Oh yeah, there you go.
This
This is gonna be good for me to answer.
Yeah.
Well, the fun question is, what is the strangest food you have eaten? Is this the one you asked me the other day? You're like,
I couldn't remember if we have or
we
not.
taught? Yeah, there's been we've done a lot of questions. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of just.
I like to talk about food.
Right,
so
I'm
there's
sure
a lot of food questions.
It did make me pause. I'm like, I don't think so, but it seems like we would have
And I did talk about my answer to this recently with someone, so that's maybe why I was confused.
Does this
too.
sound familiar at all?
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but I'll start with you. You came up with it.
We'll
You
leave
know
it
the
up
answer?
to the viewers.
Yeah, tell us if you remember any of these answers because we don't. But
Right.
Do you guys know what a century egg is?
I think so.
I wondered if you would. 'cause
We've
it
definitely asked a similar question.
Have we?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think I've heard this story.
It has
in
a
this
chicken in
room
it.
at
But
this
see,
table.
my answer that I'm
Well,
about
let's hear it.
I have an answer that I'm like, I don't know if you guys know my answer, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
Okay, so I'll start telling this story, and
Yeah,
maybe
do
you're
it.
going to have some
All right.
flashbacks.
Yeah.
This was right after I graduated college, and the campus ministry that I was involved in, every summer they sent out students to do missions work overseas, and they had a week training that they did before they would fly out for their mission. And so it was called Focus Week, and every day would focus on a specific culture that the students were going to go be a part of. And we were sending a lot of students to China that year. And so they try to emulate like the food and culture as much as they can on those days. So when you go to the cafeteria to eat, I didn't go on the mission trip. I was on the worship team for that event. So I just did that and participated in the extra stuff. So when I went to go eat lunch that day, it was Chinese day in the cafeteria. And, in Chinese culture and like lots of Asian cultures, and if you're offered something at a meal,
Right.
it is rude to say no thank you. Like you just take it. And they were walking around with this plate of century eggs, which is, I looked it up because I was like, what exactly is that?
I think I know, but I'll let you. I don't want to take your.
It's an egg
thunder here.
that is preserved 4 to 5 weeks in clay, ash, salt, quicklime, and rice hulls, and basically it just turns black.
Yeah.
And it's like gooey, kind of like Jell-O textured. And the taste was not my favorite. I did not like it. The internet described it as rich, complex, and pungent, like ripe blue cheese with a hint of ammonia.
Yeah. Mold is what we like to call that.
You would look at that
Very
and think,
earthy.
let's throw that away.
That's mold. Yeah.
Okay, that's not what I was thinking of. I was thinking the one where the it's like half grown baby chick still in the egg,
Oh,
like hasn't hatched yet, but then like while it's still starting to form, that's when you cook it.
Mm.
Oh,
And then
I've never heard of that.
eat. Oh yeah, that's a thing. And so, but it's and I forget what it's called, but you actually just eat the chicken. You think, well, that's barbaric, and it's like, well, we either eat the egg or we eat the whole chicken. So
Right.
it's like,
We
they
let
just
it,
do it.
we let that chicken have a good life.
That's right. Before we do it. So yeah, they do it. So it's not completely
Yeah.
formed, but it's enough to where.
Oh, yeah. That is
Has a bit-
somehow
Yeah, I know.
grosser.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
wasn't
it was.
that? But yeah, they walked around with this plate, and so
Now, do you just pop it in, or do you like take a little bite?
I tried to get rid of that as quick as possible, and just the texture, like it didn't seem like something you chew on.
Yeah.
It's just so like.
Did you eat the whole egg?
That's what I'm
Is
saying.
It
You
a
just
whole
po-
chicken egg?
You said
Well,
get
like
rid
a-
of it. Did you pop the whole thing in, or take a bite and you're like, get rid of it?
I popped it in. Yeah,
Yeah.
I looked up pictures online and
How to eat
because
this.
well, no, not at that point, but like I was like, how do they normally serve this? Because it was just on a plate in front of me and like cut up into small pieces.
Okay.
And sometimes it's like
okay.
sliced up and put in things,
Okay,
or it's just
right.
on a plate with like vinegar drizzled on it.
Oh.
Ugh. So mine was pretty small, and I just picked it up and just tried to swallow
Okay,
it as
so it's not
fast
the
as
whole
possible.
egg. Okay,
Right?
yeah.
But yeah, the texture
Yeah.
was like that's what I remember the most about it was the texture.
I'd like to try it.
I knew you would.
I'm game for anything
knew you
once. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's.
It's not Cool Hand Luke. I think that's the name of the movie.
Oh yeah.
There's an old
That's the
Paul
only scene.
Newman
That's the only
movie
scene I know from that whole movie.
where
Is
he
that
ate,
whatever
like,
you're about to say?
I don't know, 2 dozen eggs or something.
Yeah.
A massive amount of eggs.
Yeah.
And that was I don't even remember what it was.
I don't even know the whole
Why?
movie. I just
Yeah.
know there's this one scene in an old movie where
Yeah, he
they're
eats
eating
lots
eggs
of
as a
eggs.
competition.
Yeah. Yeah. So, would you call that fermented?
Yeah,
Fermented
that's.
egg.
I think
Yeah,
like that's a way
what
to
they
describe it, like
yeah.
a fermented egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black.
Right.
Typically.
But you feel like you remember that. Like you think we've done this question.
Mm-hmm. Something similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's shorter period of time. I don't know why I would think it would take longer to ferment an egg. I mean, an egg rots pretty quickly or whatever, but like I was thinking it's longer than 4 weeks or whatever.
This has been a long time, especially for an
That
egg.
is a long time.
Like
Yes.
for an egg, that's
Just to be buried
it's
in
known
the ground
for
or
like just
whatever.
very quick.
I mean, we've
Right.
talked about your dish that you left in the fridge for 2 weeks, and how some students ate it, and then we were like, "Are they okay?"
Yeah, yeah. There's a follow up to if you heard Craig's sermon.
Some students ate that.
They took a bite because they heard that it was really good. And I was like, guys, I mean, it's 2 weeks in the fridge. I need to throw this away. And they're like, well. And so
If you can't see mold,
it was chicken.
just go for it.
It was chicken that had been in the fridge. It didn't smell bad. But actually, it wasn't even that. It was also these really the onion rings that were there too.
Oh, you mentioned that, yeah.
They tried that. I was like, I'll try that. So I tried it, the onion rings, and I was like, oh. So that has nothing to do with anything. What's the grossest thing you had 2 nights ago with the youth group? We voluntarily. No, I had a couple answers, and I'll try to go quickly. One is shout out to Caleb from Westside, the student pastor there. He had given us. He's in one of our small groups. This men's group that I have that we meet at on Thursdays, and he had this candy. This is called durian. It's the smelliest fruit in the world, and they made a candy out of it, kind of like a Starburst. And so they're individually wrapped. And he's like, "If you guys want to try it,"
I smelled the bag.
Yeah.
And I got it just like gasoline.
you have to rip open
kinda
each
what
one
it smelled
individually, and it like immediately, just the tiny Starburst, it just fills everything, and you're like, oh. And I described it as like it's kind of oniony. Which is, I mean, in itself, it's still pretty pungent. But when you're like, no, this is a fruit, it's something in your mind is like, this shouldn't be. This doesn't. None of this should be here. This kind of smell. And so, but yeah. And then I remember eating it and being like, that's horrible.
Yeah, I've
So-
heard of durian
Yeah.
before, that it smells.
I can give you some more.
Smells. I don't want it.
Okay. I mean, Caleb has some more. He keeps hooking me up, and then some of the students are like, I'll try one. So I'm like, yeah. Anyway.
There you go.
So, but I think for the first time ever, I brought a prop. I brought some stuff for you guys to look at, which if you're here, maybe Craig will put it right here. I don't know.
I can place it. I've done that before with something.
Here, I'm
I
going
don't
to do
remember
this.
what it was.
He's going to have a picture right here of some of the gross stuff I've eaten. But I was in China for 2 different things, so I made it a tie. So you can look at them. So the first one is, I'll do it here. The first time I was in China, we were eating in Inner Mongolia, and they had this huge spread of all this food. And there was always kind of odd food, but this one was like really out in the boonies. And what I'm holding is a chicken foot.
I
Just
wondered if-
straight up,
yeah.
straight up chicken foot.
I have been offered a chicken foot.
It was, and I
said
was
no.
like, they're like, you should try it. And I was like, okay. And so that was some of the students in my class. And so I was doing, and I remember like, it is just the gnarliest, gristliest, like, like there's no, it's not like this just tastes weird. Like even the egg I get, like it's a thing that you would eat. It just tastes different. This is like, who eats the foot? It's just so odd.
It's like really chewy.
Yes.
Right?
And just grit, and you're just really,
Yeah.
Is it like the end of a chicken wing? You
Yes.
know, the bony
Yeah,
part,
yeah. But
the
it's
little-
all of that. It's 100% that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you're just like, and it doesn't break apart easy. And then the other one is we were at a festival this was a girl on my team with Laura, and they had vendors, all the stuff, and most of the stuff you could eat. And we chose to get this one because we're like, this seems pretty crazy. But it was silkworm larva. So there's a little, you can kind of see at the end, it comes on a kebab and it's cooked. And then we just pop one off. And so we are literally eating just silkworms, and it was also disgusting. So that was more of like let's do it so we could say we've done it.
Yeah, let's try
The
it.
other one, it was peer pressure from my students, and I was like,
Right.
But those are both. I wish I could be like, you know what, they're actually, it's not too bad. They have a thing going. No, it was rough. The whole thing was. So those are my two. Both my instances were in China. Was the chicken feet and the larva, silkworm larva, and those are like massive. They were just big old chunks. So
There you go.
Those were.
I don't have a good story at all.
Okay.
The best I can come up with is when I was a kid, my parents would raise a calf every year, and so then butcher, and you have all the obviously parts of the cow, and beef tongue is about as weird as I can come up with. I think
That's still. I've never had tongue before.
I haven't either.
it's weird.
Yeah.
It feels like tongue.
Yeah.
That's the weird part.
Yeah.
There's probably a way to cook it and all that,
Yeah.
but I don't think we experience that.
Okay.
So that's the weirdest I can come up
That's
with.
still
I can't think.
I still think it counts. Well, let us know if you've heard us mention any of these before. We're not sure.
That's right.
I don't know if we've ever double dipped before on our fun questions, but that may have been the first one. So
Yeah.
it's got to happen though. With as many of these episodes we're doing, I mean,
Yeah.
Sure.
I can't, and our memories aren't great.
I don't remember any of that. From you?
I'd love if somebody could remember something.
That'd be- yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, but it could have been a different answer last time. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on when I answer. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I remember another time when
Yeah.
I was dared to eat this one thing, and
I feel like when we ask our listeners,
all two of you.
I didn't do that very well.
Our
I
listener,
thought I could do this, and
Zuh.
I can't. It's that whole R and L thing I struggle with anyway, and I couldn't
Sure.
quite get it out. But like Travis Kelce's podcast, they call the
New Heights,
listeners,
uh-huh.
yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
92%ers.
Yeah, what is that about?
I don't know, and
Okay.
so I hope it's not offensive.
Okay.
Because I don't know what it means.
We don't have a nickname for ours.
No, that's what I'm saying. We should have a nickname.
The Wallulers. The Wallul.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with something.
Yeah. All right. Well,
If you remember these questions or you have a nickname,
yeah, send us some nicknames if you're
Yeah.
listening.
If you're listening.
If you're
anyone's out
listening,
there.
hello, anyone.
Mom, what do you want us to
Craig,
call
I know
you?
your mom. Yeah, that's funny. Oh. No, I was with Jamie Jones last night. We were working at the shelter, and she said that she listens to this podcast.
Folks listen. Yeah.
So shout
do,
out to Jamie.
yeah.
She doesn't
Yeah.
watch it on
Right.
YouTube, so she won't be able to see those pictures.
Right.
But she says she does listen. So we'll see if she
You bet.
does this one. All right. Well, let's move on. If you're just so you know, fun fact about today: the Royals are in the playoffs, and so we are. We want to get through these questions for your sake, and also for Lance, so he can. He's wearing the he's wearing the
Yes.
Royals shirt, so we can.
And our 94%ers are. They do listen, but not like live.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it'll
Actually,
be-
well, it'll be
so
tomorrow
the
when this
next
thing goes
day.
on.
Yeah,
I'm
it
just
won't-
letting them know that it's right in the middle of it, so
Yeah.
we're going to get going here.
You're right.
All right.
But if it drops at like 3:15, that's when the Royals play tomorrow too. So
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
could
All right.
be true.
Well, I'm really trying to go now. Here we go. So number 2, we're looking at questions number 2 and number 10. And question 2 says, what does it mean to defend the faith? This is what we see Paul doing in Acts 21 and 22. It says, what does it mean to defend the faith? And when might you need to defend the faith? And so we see a lot of people, I think it's appropriate to be passionate about what you believe and having an answer for what you believe. But sometimes people will defend it at any time, for any reason, against anyone. And it's like maybe not going to the level of 100 in every interaction is also appropriate. Sometimes, sometimes you should speak, sometimes you should hold back. And so what does it mean to do that? But also, I think the bigger one for me was when might you, or when should you speak up, even if it's difficult? Or what did you have, Craig?
Well, one thing that I did today that I hadn't before when I was, prepping my sermon and stuff, but just thinking about overall, what does the Bible say about defending our faith? And that Greek word I talked about, apologia, giving your defense for your faith. There was, 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about it a lot, 2 Corinthians 10, Philippians 1, and Titus. That's one of the characteristics of a church leader, is being able to defend their faith. But the one that stuck with me, and you kind of were getting there a little bit, is in 1 Peter 3:15, always being prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. And then he ends it by saying, with gentleness and respect. And like you were just talking about, you can go anywhere and find people that are doing the opposite of that.
They love to give a response.
Yes.
But just not with,
Right.
Not with that.
Because, that word is you giving a defense, using maybe logic and reasoning, explaining to defend what we read in Scripture, or like we talked about Sunday, your testimony, what you've witnessed, what you've seen and heard. So then when it gets to the question of when you might need to do that, I think one of the biggest things that you don't know, at all times you should be prepared and ready to do that.
Right.
But today I was just thinking how most of the time those interactions, when it's built on a relationship, the success of that, because you know the person, there's trust built between that relationship. That's when I think it's, I guess, more natural to see that gentleness and respect. Because when there's not a relationship as much, I don't know, it's easier to maybe get I really have to defend this, and that, I don't know, some of those attributes and characteristics start to go away, where you're just wanting to prove somebody wrong and not so much prove your faith. And I love that Paul used that word and then shares his testimony. Right. Because Jesus has told him, I want you to go talk about what you've seen and heard. And for him, that was Jesus himself, but so much of it is our experience with Jesus and being able to portray that well, in the power of that. And so,
Yeah. I think sometimes when we think about defending your faith, then we think of some of the least successful times. When, recently, there's Harrison Butker, who's the place kicker for the Chiefs, gave a commencement address at Benedictine College, just up the road here from us, and he got all kinds of pushback from that. And we think of those instances as somebody defending their faith. They're speaking out publicly, and I commend Butker for doing that, and didn't find anything that he said especially offensive or anything, and much of it was on target and good. In our world, I would say, one of the things he did that I think begins to become problematic is that he kind of mixed politics and his faith, and while our faith has to transcend all areas of our life, and so it ought to inform our politics. You're gonna. That's probably what incited most of the. You instantly put people on guard when you bring in today's world, politics into the conversation. no matter what you do, people are right away taking sides, and that became part of the, because in the speech he's talking to this audience, like you said, Greg, he knew his audience, and the lines that fired people up got applause in that audience for the most part. He knew the audience, and but it's gets spread on social media and internet and all those things, and you don't want to be in a position where you're causing people instantly to take sides. So that would be the one critique of all the things he said, probably, that I would offer there. But I think a couple things stand out about that, for instance. All right, and the first is that you want to have the integrity that gives you the foundation from which you can be heard, and so. And this is harder in a public setting like that, because I don't know Harrison Butker, right? I have actually heard competing, it's like anything else. Enough people meet you, then you're going to find somebody who says, hey, he's greatest, and somebody who says, yeah. And so, but as far as I can tell, he's a guy who's doing his best to honor God and loves his family and all those things. And so, but, so much of this is overlap with last week. We talked about, man, the smaller audience might be better for these conversations because you've earned the right to be heard by that person.
Right.
And so I would say start there to earn the right to be heard. Be courageous, right? You have to. It's hard even in that small setting, even one-on-one with a family member or friend, to say this is the truth, and to be able to share that in a loving way, because there's probably going to be some pushback, which is the next one. Expect opposition, right? Not everybody. It's going to be. You should expect some pushback, and then stand your ground. I think you start by knowing the truth, that it's God's word, and that's what you're explaining, and so that's kind of just from that example. It's not the best example or whatever, but it's recent and in our kind of neck of the woods with Harrison Butker. I think that's what he exemplified there. So
yeah, I think when I was, especially the second part, we already talked about what does it mean to defend the faith, talking about apologetics, and
those all come from Bob Russell too, by the way.
Okay,
those
I figured.
Yeah,
I have a list too that was not my own,
yes.
but I forgot. I should have quoted it, but it was just a couple of specific things of when might you need to defend, and like what are some different times. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, online or against someone who's maybe arguing against me, I'll have to defend. But it's pretty rare. Like that's kind of made up, like it's not going to be really like that. In general, it was, when might you need to do that to defend the faith? When you're trying to preserve the truth. And so I find that, when someone is speaking up, like my context, the people I'm closest with, or the times when the relationships I've made is just with the students, because that's who I'm around a lot, and with them asking questions a lot. So I play devil's advocate or push back on certain ideas. I go out of my way to kind of try to defend faith in a loving way, because I realize, I don't think they know. I don't think they know what they just said was not just kind of wrong, but like really wrong. I think all roads lead to heaven. And you're like, okay, let's stop the lesson for 1 second. Let's just talk about it, and in a kind way. But when you're trying to preserve the truth, when you're trying to strengthen believers, sometimes I've had other people do this too, but sometimes even students, it's been a while, but like maybe even getting upset or like, well, I just don't think any of that's true. And I realize there's an audience going on right now. And you can sense this even on social media. Sometimes if you're talking with someone and they're pushing back, you're like, this is no longer just between the two of us. There's other people maybe watching this for good or bad. So you got to be careful about doing online, but the way I approach someone else is being seen by other people. So I need to understand when I'm defending the faith, that even if I don't know how this is going to turn out, but other people can see what it looks like. When would you defend the faith? When you're trying to proclaim good news, and then also promoting justice and love, like to call out things that are going on that it's like, this isn't good. And so you're trying to say like, this is not how Jesus would react, and in any case, it's still vague enough where people could be like, well, that's what I'm doing. And they still could be doing it in a way that's not healthy or wise. And so I think what both of you said, which is the relational part, is such a key thing. And I think just having wisdom, because you will never stop talking if you're there's opportunities 24/7 to defend your faith. Just go online. You'll never end. And yet you will. You'll have to stop and go eat and go to the bathroom, and you'll have to decide, well, that's going to be a line. And so it really can't just be as soon as someone says something, I'm attacking it. It has to be done with wisdom and discernment. And over the years, I have found it's easy for me to jump in and just to debate whatever, but doing it with wisdom, with relationships, those are the ones where someone can press back and even ask a question, which I appreciate, and it'd be more of a discussion. Anyway, I like I like it when a student, like I said, that's my context. I like it when they press or they ask and they think I'm wrong or whatever, and it's in a good way. Like, hey, let's talk about it. I'm so quick. One of my favorite things to say is, what a great question. What a great question, and let's talk about that because. And I'll get into this in my second answer, but one of the reasons I like this group so much is because little kids, you're just sort of holding their hand through faith a little bit. You're teaching them about, stories in the Bible. And with adults, we're kind of set in our ways a little bit more, right? We kind of know what we want, but students are just like, I don't know. And they're like, what about this? And they're not afraid to ask the question. They're not, they're more open to wanting to know. And, anyway, so I like being a part of that process of knowing the audience and helping them have the tools to defend their faith and also to practice defending the faith. But in any case, I think I answered it as best I could. Yeah. When would you defend it? I think we all have our perspective on that. But
yeah, I think for most people, it's going to come in those interpersonal relationships, right? And in fact, Paul talks about it in the end of Ephesians chapter 4. He said he's talking to the believers, new believers in Ephesus. Now that you've left this old life behind, now that your mind has been renewed, go speak the truth to your neighbor, right? So find those opportunities are going to find us probably. Be ready for them, like Peter said in 1 Peter 3, which means you're doing some of those things we talk about all the time. It's almost boring how often we say things like, you probably ought to be involved in worship, in church and small group and study the Bible with others and have a consistent plan to be in God's word, and because that's how you're prepared.
Yeah. Right? And I was just thinking too while you're talking, having the relationship established, and that's kind of the context of the conversation, allows for follow-up as well.
Right.
Because like you said, students will ask questions, and I'm sure it's never like you answer it and then it's just over.
And they're like, thanks. I have no follow. I'm good.
We covered
You've
everything.
done everything. Yeah.
And so, just knowing that it's just not a one-time thing.
Right.
And that there's going to be multiple instances, but man, like the follow-up, and just the times we saw Jesus do that with the disciples, the follow-up, like Paul continually wrote to the churches to follow up with them. Like that's the natural course of how that'll play out.
I think also one other thing, and we'll move on, but the thing that helps me is when I look at the word defend, I get defensive. I need to defend the faith. That is we're being attacked. When I use the mindset with the students and they ask a question, I don't feel attacked. I don't feel like, I got to defend this. I'm like, hey, you must have misunderstood. Let me help you here. Right. And so, and having that mindset of like, I get to help them instead of like, I'm defending against this, this heresy going on in our youth room. I'm like, no. Like we can kind of work through this. And so when I'm talking to an adult or someone else who, is trying to press, I'm like, this is a good opportunity. Let me, to kind of work through it, maybe work through how I explain it. And so instead of being like defensive and defending, I can.
Well, the word carries with it the idea of clarification.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's not,
and that could be a good thing. I think we sometimes get on guard, like,
we
have to. It's us versus them. And it's like,
Right.
We're going to skip down to the very last question. And if you heard Craig preach, he gave us a good example. It says, basically, share your testimony. We looked at how Paul did that in Acts 21 and 22. And so instead of just, Craig did a good job of teaching on it and then said, well, here's my testimony. And I thought that was, a good way to end it, is just to talk about that. So we have the opportunity now, instead of talking about testimonies, it just says, all right, let's do it too. So, give time for anyone to share their testimony. That's it. Not even a question. Just go for it.
Not even a question.
Not even a question. Now, you already did, though.
Yeah.
And so are we doing this again? Are you giving it again?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, am I exempt from it?
I don't
Just
know.
pass me over?
No, we can see if it.
See if it changes.
Yeah.
Kind of like the gross food. If it maybe it's
Holds
changed
true.
since the first time we've done it. Yeah. Okay. I'll go first since they've already heard yours, and then you guys can.
Yeah.
So I was whenever I'm doing it, whether I wrote it down, which is weird because I'm like I can just give it, but I always have to put my thoughts. But I always put like, what was my life like before? How did I come to know Jesus, and what is it like now? And so, just very briefly, before my parents were divorced before I could even remember, so I just grew up with that being the norm. And but even so, going to different churches. My dad was non-instrumental Church of Christ, and my mom was Methodist. So I grew up Methodist most of my life, and we moved around a lot for just different reasons. And so I always thought I was always kind of shy because I was always a new kid, but for whatever reason, churches, whatever one we went to, it was always welcoming and accepting, and I always kind of felt okay there, and so I just enjoyed churches. My mom told me the funny story I didn't realize, but when I was in second grade, I said I wanted to be a pastor when I grew up. And she's like, really? And she goes, why? And I said, because they only work one day a week. And so, but I still had that in mind of like, basically, I just didn't want to do work. But also, I just was around church a lot and seemed to like it. But I grew up as a Methodist. I went through confirmation, just had this background of church, even though we moved and it was different churches. How I came to really know Jesus, though, was that my dad married my stepmom, Teresa, and they were married for over 25 years up until he passed recently, a few years ago. But when they got married, she was Catholic, and he was non-instrumental Church of Christ. And so they said, let's go to a church where we can, take our blended family, and they found Wallula. And so when I was in fourth grade, I came to Wallula for the first time, and having a regular youth group was a new thing. So I got to have a regular youth group. Kent and Anna, my youth pastors, and his wife, they had a consistent youth leader who knew me, had a consistent camp at Mission Lake Christian Camp and CIY. And so really went from just I enjoyed being at church to like having just more ownership of it. So in middle school, in seventh grade, 1993, I accepted Jesus, and it almost was what's the word I'm trying to say? There wasn't a big deal in how I was. There wasn't some moment where it's like, oh, I was just really convicted. I just got to the point where they asked the question, like, do you, if you believe in Jesus? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I've believed in Jesus.
Right.
This is, I should have done this years ago. And so I just realized, the entry point for accepting Jesus, for being saved, is like, do you believe and do you want to accept him and follow him? And I was like, yes. Oh, what? Yeah. And so I did. And really it was after that, I decided that, as I was growing in my faith, that I was going to go to a Bible college for a year, just to get a better understanding, and then go off to KU. And it was there they really pressed me to, talking about growing in your faith. Like, I was being asked questions about the Bible, like, how do you know you believe? I'm like, I don't know. Like, this is all, and so it like forced me to ask hard questions. It wasn't just, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't just grow up in it. So I had to like work at it for the first time. And so I learned like how to answer some of those questions, and then it would ask me harder questions. I'd be like, well, what about this then? And getting in the habit of Bible study and apologetics. And I really learned to do that. And on top of knowing the Bible, it also pressed me to like live it out. So opportunities to go to Mexico and Honduras and China, and opportunities for mission trips, opportunities to serve students on camp teams, opportunities to work at a church, an internship out in DC. And so in living it out and in serving, I was like, man, I can't imagine going to KU now. Like every year I was like, I'll go next year. And then at finally it just came to the point where I was like, this is all I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I just want to serve God. So who knows what I'll do, but this is what I'm going to do. I just developed a heart. And so I graduated Ozark, and I was like, I'm going to be a missionary. Came back to Wallula and told my youth pastor, Mark, I was like, you got me for a year. I'm going to raise support for this next year, and then I'm out of here. So I started helping out with youth group, and it was the Thanksgiving banquet 2 months later that he announced to all of Wallula he was leaving. And he told
Did you find out in the moment with
he
everybody?
told me a week earlier, and he's like, I'm leaving. You should take over. I was like, there's no way I'm staying at Wallula. My parents go here. I don't want to be that person who stays in Lansing. I want out of here. I'm going to go do mission work and do some cool stuff overseas. And I was like, but I'll stay until like May. I'm here for May anyway. So I stayed, and I officially came on January 5th, 2005. And this January 5th, it'll be 20 years. So, I got a few more months. So I ended up staying. And I love it. And kind of going back to the other thing, I really feel like as part of the testimony of how God has used my life, early on, I was just insecure and shy and moved around a lot. And I find like being a part of a student ministry, I'm just drawn to students who are questioning and unsure, and whether they're new from military or they're just new to faith. Mm-hmm. And I love being that person who can like step in and help, not only make them feel help them to belong. Thank you. Mm-hmm. But also just help strengthen their faith, and just all the things that people have done for me over the years, I get to do that for them. And I love it. I love it so much. So, I don't know how long these things are supposed to go, but that was my testimony.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's just everybody's story with Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Is the important thing to remember. And you said something kind of off the cuff at the beginning there. I wrote it down, but that seems weird because it's my story.
Well, for me personally here, I'm like, I can do this. But.
Yeah. But you shouldn't feel weird about that at all. Yeah. And I would encourage everybody to sit down and to write out your story and to think about it. And just part of, we've mentioned this verse a couple times today, 1 Peter chapter 3 and 15 to 18. Be prepared to make your defense, and part of that is just the difference that Jesus made in your life, and so write that out and be prepared. And when I preached a couple weeks ago, I said, try to get like 2 minutes, and be able to share that story in 2 minutes. And I think that's really true, right? But then part of what Craig said last Sunday is, know your audience, right? And so you can share your story in 2 minutes. But you'll know your audience. If you know your audience, you know where to. Okay, but then this happened in my life, and we kind of have this shared experience in this way, and this is how Jesus made a difference in that season of my life, and so you can kind of mold, your testimony to fit your audience a little bit. You can't share every event in your life. This is, the top 37 things that Jesus did in my life. You can't do that, but you can say, if you narrow it down to those 2 minutes. So for me, it would be something like this, that, I grew up in the church. I can't remember a time when we didn't go to church, so I can't really remember a time when I didn't know at least about Jesus, and grew up and accepted him when I was in high school and was baptized. But I spent a lot of my life sort of like, I remember that story in the Old Testament. Abraham, he rescues Lot, and he's like, if one, he starts with however many people, 20 people, if there's 20 people here, and if there's 10 people, he just makes this deal seemingly with God. Yeah. If there's one person, would you save that one person? And I felt like I spent a lot of time in my life trying to make deals with God. If I do this, will you do that? And sort of thing. And I ended up at Bible college, not because I was sold out on ministry or 100% committed even in my relationship with Jesus, but because I thought it would placate him. And I thought I could make a deal. If I did this, then I can go off and do what I want and the rest of my life. And ended up in ministry and figuring out about my sophomore year there what it means to really be in relationship with Jesus 100% and kind of all in life with him. I don't always get that right, but I figured out what that looks like a little bit, and did my best from that point on to live chasing after Jesus in that way. And man, there's been ups and downs in life, good times and bad, and no matter the situation, I've been a person that could live with a peace that passes understanding and a joy that is not innate to me.
Yeah.
It comes from somewhere else. And that's kind of the best way I can describe that. Yeah. So about 2 minutes. If you can get it to about 2 minutes, and then you can share more as you get in your audience, and so you want to be able to have it at 2 minutes so you can share with that guy at lunch who said, "Hey, what did you do on Sunday?" Yeah. Well, this is what I did.
Yeah.
I was at church, and this is why. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I wrote mine out on Sunday, just in front of people, and I had done that when I got baptized in college. Part of that was I was like one of 6 or 7 college students that got baptized at an event, and they had all of us get up and share a story, and so that was my first time doing it, and they guided me through. And I wrote it out like very detailed, kind of like word for word, and yeah, so that was my first like practiced at it. And then once I did that, I felt confident to be able to do it and kind of adapt it to the right audience and stuff. But yeah, on Sunday I was like, I want to make sure I get this right, being in front of everyone. And so I told it on Sunday, and a lot of people connected with my upbringing, and I kind of brought up some things that, like, not that I missed it, I just didn't talk about it, but like I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I went through kind of like I guess like the youth group kind of thing they had, and like even like elementary age, like memorizing prayers and like the creeds and stuff. Yeah. Like that was part of my upbringing, and I did it kind of like absent-mindedly. Like I had them all done, and I didn't care about them, so like I just did it because people wanted me to. Right. And looking back, like there's like I understand them now, and I understand why they recited them, to remember pieces of their faith and the story of God. But so growing up in the Catholic Church, I just didn't really put much effort into wondering why I was there, why my mom kept dragging me there every Sunday. And yeah, I always just thought, well, I think God's real. Right. But that was as far as that thought would go. Right. And then, just kind of like throughout my life, like teenage years, college, like really just centered a lot of my decisions around myself. And I wanted to gain attention and just enjoy the pleasures of life and do what I wanted to do. And then I realized pretty quickly that it was not sustainable, and I was hurting people, and it was just going in the wrong direction. And if it kept going that way, something was going to explode. So I wasn't like seeking after God, but I was like kind of becoming like curious in a way, like because I had friends that were in church, and it's kind of like, well, why are people my age choosing to go to church and especially like going to Bible college, and so I got asked to join a worship team, and I don't know if that's the best method for worship teams to ask.
And when you first heard that, I was like, really? Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just the drums, Craig.
I know.
That's barely worship.
Didn't have a microphone, so.
If you were to rank the spirituality of the different people on stage, would you say the drummer usually does fall sort of at the bottom? Yeah.
Drums and bass are kind of.
I was gonna say, that's how I feel. I don't even play an instrument, but I'm like, it's not like the acoustic. That's not like
Oh
okay,
yeah,
fine.
that's
That's the
serious.
spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I went. It was funny. I didn't tell this detail. I went and played at a music festival that was on a buffalo farm in Kansas,
Sure.
and
Yeah, of course.
and we were on the stage, and right behind me was just like a little herd of buffalo.
Yeah.
And we were playing. It was fun.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, I ended up playing with them, and like I said on Sunday, all of a sudden I was like, saw them reading their Bible on their own and praying, and it was like, oh, you can like give effort into this relationship with God. And yeah, I had this experience where all of a sudden I was like, oh, the gospel's for me too, and I'm not outside of Jesus's forgiveness. And that just became very real to me. And then, like we've talked about in Scripture, like someone had to kind of lead me to that decision of baptism.
Sure.
And that, like, I came to a point where I believed and knew that Jesus died on the cross for me, but like taking those steps, like that was kind of a slow move towards that for me. And you know, I had to let go of things from my former life, and it was kind of a slow burn towards like figuring out what it means to follow Jesus, and then making that decision to be baptized. And got baptized in college, and yeah, once I joined a small group and was in community with other believers, like that was just exponential growth in my faith and understanding Scripture. That was a just super exciting time in my life, and just and I'm so thankful for it happening like in the college years and the people that I was around. But yeah, I wanted to be a band teacher and strive to excel in that. And I did that for a couple years, and during that, just over and over, like I did an internship at a church in Manhattan right before I started my first year of teaching, and I was like, man, I think I want to do this instead. You know, after I studied and graduated and student taught, it's like, what about this? And then over the years, just felt like the ways that God had gifted me, and just what I had experienced in the past few years in Manhattan, just that push towards ministry. And yeah, so like I said on Sunday, and you just said, it's not a walk in the park following Jesus, and but giving effort to that relationship through Scripture and prayer and worshiping together is just such a joy in life.
Yeah.
And at times it's really hard, and it's not easy, but it's an amazing journey to be on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys both answering. I'm excited about this week for those that are doing this, because I think everyone's story is really unique,
Right.
and you never really know what part of your story is going to
Yeah.
impact someone else, or reach out to someone else, or be an example to someone else, and or even just like, I had no idea.
Yeah, that happened to me so many times after the service, and it was a lot of people came up and they connected with the same thing, but they just never knew.
We were on a buffalo farm too.
Yeah, and we would, for all the 32 percenters out there, we would, truly,
we really need to have.
Truly, we would love to hear your story.
Yeah.
So if you,
I get a kick
if
out
you
of
want
it.
to email, if you write out that story and email it to us, we would love to read that and to hear from you, and that'd be awesome. And let us know, and maybe we'll have you on the podcast to share that testimony. That'd be
also,
awesome.
fun fact. I wasn't even looking for this, but last week, as I was preparing for the sermon, stumbled upon a YouTube channel where it's just people giving their testimony.
Is that right?
And I ran across one. I started watching it. They're kind of lengthy. The one I started watching was like an hour long, I think.
Oh my word!
But it was like an ex-gang member that,
Sure.
the things that he witnessed in life, like I just couldn't believe hearing it.
Right.
And then to see where he's at now, and the ministry he has, and how Jesus, like, total 180.
Yeah.
So there's some really cool things to check out too. It's just
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of? Are you going to plug it or?
I can. Well, I'll put it in the.
Just go look
comments.
for it.
Yeah.
It's out there on the internet.
I can't remember what the word
Always
was.
good advice.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll put it out there so
Yeah,
people
that's
can go
cool.
find it.
That'd be good.
No, that's good. Well, I think there's power in everyone's story, and whether it's an ex-gang member, or someone who's been through something like just really traumatic and then come to know Jesus, or someone who's like, man, I just grew up in the church and loved Jesus, followed him, and now I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
I think there's power in both those kinds of stories, and so whatever your
absolutely.
story is, I think God has the ability to renew that and to just use your own story to make an impact on the lives of others. So
Yeah.
well, we're glad that you guys are with us for all of that, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week.